Hey, it's Yelena. I am your host. I am the host of this channel, Modern Mystic, and on this channel we explore practices and helpful perspectives that serve you in becoming a conscious creator of your life, of your reality. And in today's episode, I want to talk about navigating life's big transitions. And specifically, I want to bring our attention to this place I like to call the void. When we are in between, where we are transitioning or have moved away from the old, but whatever is next hasn't emerged yet. Whatever is coming next hasn't been revealed. So we are in this in between. I find that how we navigate this time of transition in our life is really key to what we're able to create. As someone who has just reemerged after a 3-year void, unplanned, they're never really planned. However, we can either choose to consciously step into transition or life will guide us there. So when things start to be removed out of your life or things get really uncomfortable in your life, when there's friction and you just know that something has to change, you can't do things the way you've always done them. So things you're like turning over, you're turning a new leaf, but you don't really know what's next. This is an invitation to step into the void and to really use this time and to receive this time as a gift. When you're transitioning out of the old and you know that whatever is next cannot be a repeat of the old, and you are ready to transcend these old patterns and you are tired of learning these old lessons and you want to almost enter into a new dimension of your life, because that's what it feels like. You're entering a completely different experience of your life. And so there is a death that happens. There is a death that happens of what was, but there's also a part of you that has to go through a death and rebirth as well. So these are the perspectives I wish I was equipped with during my 3-year transition in my career, where it was also a very much internal turnover and internal transition. And I do believe that if I had these perspectives that I'm going to share with you today, that potentially the timeline of my transition would have followed a different trajectory. Potentially. There's no way of knowing. But, you know, it takes as long as it takes. And this is another thing we'll talk about. So let's dive in. Let's dive into these practices and perspectives on how to navigate the void as a conscious creator and step into a new dimension of your life on the other side of this transition. Which brings me to the first useful perspective of this, is that it's really natural for us to want to resist a change that's coming. And especially if you are someone who's developed a sensitivity to where you sense a change coming before any sort of external evidence is showing you that a change is happening. You are sensing that something is coming to an end, whether that's a relationship or a career. It's kind of like sensing a change in seasons. You know how in nature, birds and animals, they can sense a change of season is coming. They can sense the fall is coming or winter is coming. And these times of transition between the seasons is literally what happens in our life. So things naturally start to turn over, and it's natural for us to want to resist the change that's coming. And what happens is this resistance, we create unnecessary friction, and our focus of attention is dispelled in the wrong direction. Because what really we should be doing in this time, when you sense that a change is coming, this is the perfect time to practice gratitude for whatever it is that's ending in your life. Literally being very mindful and almost stretching the moments and really being in this time instead of thinking of what's ahead or instead of resisting this change, using this time to express gratitude for this thing that's ending in your life, this thing that served you. It's sort of like alchemy, where this process of death and something transitioning, we are using this process to fertilize the soil where we're going to plant seeds for whatever vision is next. How are we tending to this transition? Are we in resistance or are we in gratitude? And another thing I believe we tend to do is once we are coming to this sort of end, and let's say something's ended, and which signifies that death, right? Death of something. If we think about, again, how nature facilitates this process, if we think about the slow decay that follows death and the slow disintegration, right? I'm thinking of like soil, the slow disintegration of elements back to their original sort of elemental phase that then becomes that fertile soil where we're going to plant the seeds for our future vision, right? So how are we engaging with this disintegration? And I believe we have this tendency when something has ended, we kind of would just want to move on from it. And we have a tendency to minimize what has happened or devalue that journey in some way. So because it's old, maybe it's an old version of you that's dying, right? And there's always, whatever it is that's ending, there's a version of us associated with that old thing. Who I was in that past relationship is an old version of me. Who I was in my last career is a different version of me. And there are things that I see now that that version of me chose that I don't necessarily align with anymore. And so I kind of diminish that and I devalue that unintentionally. But just because that thing no longer serves you doesn't mean that it didn't serve you up until this point. And we have to acknowledge the service that and everything we received from that experience, because again, it's what creates this fertile soil. So now we're in the void and we're watching this disintegration of the old, but the new hasn't emerged yet. So you are literally suspended and in the unknown. And it can be really uncomfortable for people. And so this is where we tend to rush into something. And if we are indeed rushing into something new, it's almost guaranteed that we are going to repeat the same lesson or a pattern or a cycle because we haven't taken this mindful opportunity to disintegrate and receive what we need from this time of transition. So as we rush into something else because we can't stand being in the void, we can't find comfort in the unknown, we rush into something new. And what happens, and I'm speaking from personal experience, what happens is that you then rush into something new. Your energy focuses and attention is going towards that instead of tending to this disintegration. You know, it's like, I'm gonna skip winter. I just want to go straight to summer, and I want to pick up the fruits that haven't really ripened yet. So the way that I've experienced it is that, you know, when you're walking in the forest and you're walking and you're walking, and then hours have passed, and all of a sudden you're back to the tree that you passed like hours ago. And you're like, oh, I just made another loop, you know, and it's because I didn't have the new map and I wanted to keep walking anyway. Can I be in the unfamiliar? Can I be in the void? Can I receive what is meant for me here? Or am I so uncomfortable that I'm gonna rush into something and repeat the same lesson? And look, I believe that we are always choosing our lessons. And sometimes we choose our lessons more than once. And we can be disheartened by that. Because in being disheartened by it, we are wishing for something to have been different. We're wishing we would have done something different. We would be somewhere else. We should have been somewhere else. We could have been somewhere else. And this is just another version of diminishing and devaluing your journey. And it's just piling on more things for you to sort of move through, because you are in resistance again. If we're choosing the same lessons more than once, then that's just what it is. And we can be aware of that and we can acknowledge that without penalizing ourselves, because that resistance to what is actually us being out of touch with reality. If I'm resisting what is currently true and what is currently in my reality, I am out of touch and my judgment is clouded. So I cannot conceive a vision that's going to be in my highest service when I'm in this clouded perspective. So we don't want to be in resistance. We want to be in gratitude. And we want to use this time for review and for active listening. This is another thing I wish I knew during my 3-year transition of my career, and specifically in the first year. I definitely rushed into something, and then I rushed into something again the year later. And a part of me knew that it wasn't exactly the thing. And at the same time, a big part of me knew that I needed that experience. It's almost like, it was like me reviewing those lessons one more time before I graduated that class and moved on. I was like, okay, I know there is more for me here, and this is what's present, so I'm just gonna do it. And it served its purpose, and I found my gratitude for it. So back to the thing I really wish I knew was that this time of transition is best served as a time to listen, as opposed to a time to act or make big decisions about what's next. It's like, can you give yourself and your mind rest and space from having to know what's next? We have this need to know, like, I need to know what's next. I need to know where I'm going. And even as somebody who's really comfortable not knowing ahead, there is still this urgency that bubbles up. And what happens is when we move into that urgency and we give into that urgency that you want to know what's coming next, we are bound to repeat the pattern and bound to keep walking and come back to the same tree. So treat this time as a time to listen. And what that really means is creating a conducive environment within your mind. So your internal environment and your external environment are conducive for you to, one, observe yourself, observe the patterns from this old dynamic, and then two, create enough space for inspiration to come. So we are entering the mode of being a witness and an observer of our life and of this pocket of time. That's really the gift of it, is to pause and just allow yourself to be in the unknown. And this experience of suspending yourself in the unknown is going to teach you so much and prepare you for whatever is next. And you're building resilience, and you're creating foresight for a vision that you can't conceive yet. The only way to conceive the vision is to create enough space for inspiration to descend. You know, I love the etymology of the word inspiration. It's an ancient Indo-European word, spiritus, which means breath. And Richard Rudd has a beautiful interpretation of inspiration through his work with the Gene Keys. And he talks about inspiration as a slow, gradual release of your inner breath out into the world. And so it just, for me, what that means is we can't command inspiration. We can't will it. All we can do is create an environment for inspiration to descend, and it's gradual. And then once it's part of us, then it becomes this gradual release out into the world once we enter into the phase of creation. But we can't enter creation without entering the void first. So navigating the void, using that time to listen as opposed to making big decisions or taking big actions. And also, as we are listening, we're redefining our old definitions of ourselves and about ourselves, about the world, about our possibilities, what's ahead of us, our relationships. And another thing I wish I really did during my time is to have documented a lot more of my internal landscape and the different moments of awareness that you inevitably receive when you are in active listening mode in this transition, and really documenting, like I'm talking about like daily journaling of the things that you are watching, observing, and experiencing. Because from personal experience, my best insights come from the pages of my very own journal. Sometimes like journal entries that are a week old will reveal something that I'm asking about today. And it's not these insights that come from my pages of the things that I've observed and I've witnessed and I've documented. No one could have told me about this. Nobody could have pointed me in this direction. Only me, myself, and I. Look what I found. Okay. Of course, I'm also a big proponent of having a meditative practice during this time of transition, because meditative practice and cultivating a meditative mind is a huge foundation, is the foundation for all of these processes to be supported, because you're able to witness yourself and your patterns with more clarity. And a lot of my inspiration I receive in my meditative state. Most of my inspirations of very clear impulse of the things that I need to look at or the things that I need to do next come to me in my meditative practice. So if you've never had a meditative practice, this time of transition is a really beautiful opportunity to invite that into your life, so that you are really stepping into the seat of a powerful observer of yourself and your life, and therefore a conscious creator of your reality. Which also brings me to this moment to pay attention to, and it's about how you interpret events during this time of transition. This is another thing to observe, is how you interpret the things that are happening during this time. So if things are taking longer than I imagined or that I wanted them to, if things are not going the way that I had planned or not really the way I've envisioned them, how am I interpreting that experience, right? Am I interpreting that to mean that things are just not working out, let me go back to this old thing, or let me rush into something else and inevitably repeat a pattern? Or am I, in the seat of the observer, able to interpret that genuinely to make it mean that I am simply being redirected to something better, right? If the timing is not aligning, can I make that mean that it's aligning actually perfectly for something much bigger that I cannot conceive yet? So I find that this time of transition, we can really start to see how we interpret events, and how you interpret events is really revealing to your current state of consciousness and the thoughts that you are engaging with day to day, which is then, of course, creating your outer reality. So can you choose to interpret events in a way that will empower you and serve your next higher vision? That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So I'm a big believer that whether you are choosing a transition, like consciously stepping into it, or if life just guided you into the space where things are being removed, I really believe that you are well poised and in the perfect time and space to create a life that you want, and moving into a direction of your personal evolution with clarity, with energy, with awareness, consciously creating whatever it is that you envision next for your life. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you received any insights, I would love to know about them. So leave me a note, like this video, share, and we will talk next time. Thank you so much. Bye.